near $1 trillion farm bill, and so far no way to pay for it, but little matter to a Democratic Senate that keeps pushing it, and a lot more spending just like it. This is the same Senate that, with the same measure, barely trims food stamp spending at all. It makes you wonder in this scandalous environment how and why this scandalous spending behavior continues. So Jedediah Avila and Lenwood Brooks and Jonas Max Ferris. Jedediah, what happened here? I thought this would at least get sidetracked.
I'm not surprised. I mean, $17 trillion in debt. We didn't just get here by someone snapping their fingers. We got here by them doing things like this, spending out of control. And it's interesting because even the House passed a bill also. The Agriculture Committee came up with something that also doesn't really touch food stamps. It touches it by about 3%, significantly higher than what the Senate is doing. But still, if you look at food stamps, if you look at the amount of money we're spending, 1 in 7 people on food stamps, $80 billion spent last year alone on food stamps. The idea that the Senate would look to cut 0.5%, I mean, it makes people out here want to laugh.
Right. In the end, Lenwood, they're spending far more than they were before, whatever allowances, tiny as they are, to Jedediah's point, that they're making for food stamps. So I'm just wondering, with all these scandals going on, this is the one thing I thought we didn't hear about, because at best they would be sidetracked and unable to do this. Apparently not the case.
Well, it's hard to touch mandatory spending, like food stamps. You look from years 2008 to 2012, there was an increase in the program by over 60%. And this gets to the real problem, which is too often in government, they look at the number, the amount they're spending, instead of looking at the outcome. So people assume, oh, this must be a great program, we're spending a lot, instead of saying, why in the world are so many people still on food stamps, and what can we do to get them off of it, get them a job and be able to support themselves?
But Jonas, what part of almost $1 trillion don't these guys seem to understand? That's what worries me.
Well, it could have been worse. That's about the only good thing you could say. That at least it's not an increase radically more than it's been in the past. The problem with these kind of bills is there's something for both sides of the aisles. That's why they get through generally. I mean, who doesn't like farmers and poor people? That's the bottom line. And we have to insure farmers, where taxpayers pay 2/3 of it, and they make money, and the price goes down. And then, the poor situation. I understand how the rolls would grow during a recession, but we're not in a recession anymore. Like, what's the path to then lower it back to the levels it was at before the recession? And that's where the spending never kind of goes back to the pre-recession levels, and it just kind of elevates. So, but again, both sides like the spending. It gets you votes, a lot of money to your office. So, yeah, these are the ones that get with the most approval, basically.
All right, but this is one of the most runaway spending programs of all. If food stamps, like you say, 1 out of 7, or close to 1 out of 6, by the way, are getting these. I'm not saying that the genuinely poor deserve them and need them, and we're all for helping them.
Absolutely.
But if we've gotten to the point where that is the case, then we're as third world as you can get.
That's true. And these farm bills on their own, usually that money goes to large commercial farms that don't need the money. This was instituted years ago in the 1930s to help these small farms that were struggling. These farmers often aren't struggling. The average farmer, their income is around over $80,000 a year, closer to $84,000 a year, and they're living in rural areas where their cost of living is lower. So taxpayers are funding something that they shouldn't be funding. We don't have the money for this, and no one in Washington wants to hear 2 very simple words, which is, we're broke. We don't have the money.
But Lemon, we keep doing this. I was just surprised something this eye-popping. I could see slipping in a $50 billion item, and these days that's almost like a rounding error. But this is a pretty big deal to just sort of slip through, and they say, oh, you didn't see that one? I mean...
Well, it goes back to 80% of this bill, Neil, is food stamps.
Yeah.
And we don't see the momentum from Congress to touch many of the mandatory spending programs, such as Social Security, Medicare, and even food stamps. But we're going to have to, though, at some point. We can't continue on forever.
I hear you. But you guys are a lot younger than me, so you're the ones who worry. I think I'll just skate by. But we'll see you back a little bit later in the show. In the meantime, here's the great news. Small business